Hey everyone, and welcome to my Procreate demo for the piece I call Deaddie. Well, actually I don't call it Deaddie, my kid calls it Deaddie, but anyways, this is a sketch that I did because I sat down with my son and I was just like, what should I draw? And he was like, it's Halloween, draw a zombie. So, zombie, here it comes. So first I did this in multiple files so that I could a little bit more cleanly break up the process. And the beginning here, this is just the rough stage. I sort of wanted to show just a little bit more separated out, like not like really in depth, but just a little bit like the different stages that I might go through, trying to rough in an illustration and then add tighter lines, and then what I might do when I color it. So in general, I wanted this to just sort of be fun and goofy and over the top. I wanted to do a couple of shapes that maybe I don't do all the time, and just really try to have fun with it for like a cool Halloween thing. So I'm not going into detail with showing all of my layers and everything, but I'll explain it. In the future, I'm working on setting up a video where you actually see some of the screen and how I'm doing it, because I know a lot of people have asked for that, but honestly that's just harder for me to hook up than it is this. So I'll just talk through it. So right now, in this rough, everything is on, there's the white layer, the background layer, and then I'm rough sketching everything except for that hand that's in the foreground. That was done in on a separate layer. And then this is me now going into flattening all that into one thing, lowering the opacity, and now I'm just doing a cleaner line. This is not meant to be the final line for the actual illustration, but just something that's cleaner from sort of an organizational point of view for me to finalize later. I don't know if I've talked about this before, but you know, one of the biggest things about art, about doing art, is actually organization and process and all that, which is one of the reasons why I even do these videos, because it helps me a lot to sort of solidify my process and continue to experiment with it. You know, organization as far as your layers and what you're going to do next and all the different steps that you take in order to try and make yourself more confident with each stage of the illustration. So much of that is all just about organization, and that's why practice is one of the most important things you can do for art, because the more and more you do it, the more and more you find better methods for yourself. So as you see here, I'm just basically going through and making this line a little cleaner, or at least a little bit louder so I can see what's going on. Originally I was going to have his right hand grabbing his skinny little leg, but then I decided that I instead wanted to put like that big sock on him, just because I thought that was funnier. So he's also like a Boy Scout, because I said to my son, I'm like, what should he be? He should be something like a cowboy or just something fun instead of just a generic zombie. And he didn't have any ideas, so I just said, screw it, a Boy Scout. So as you see here, this is the finished rough for the entire drawing. So now what it's going to do is we're going to go into a tighter line version. So I created a new document that was a larger size file. I imported those lines, and that's where we are here. So those lines got imported, and then the opacity is dropped way down, and now I'm going through and doing the tighter line on this. All of the drawing for this entire piece was done with the exact same pencil. It's the brush / pencil that I use in all of the illustrations, which is in Procreate. You take the standard technical pencil and you go to the section where you can adjust its maximum size, and then I just increase its maximum size. That's all this is. So again, I get a lot of questions about the brushes I use. I don't use any brushes outside of what Procreate provides. I just adjust one or two of them, and the only thing I adjust is their max size. There's a lot of great brushes out there. I recommend you go check them out and see what's good for you. But for me, I find all that brush management is just more energy than it's worth for what I try to do. So here we are now. We're doing the tight line on the entire thing. Like I said, same brush, going at it. I'm not really going to zoom in on this video because I post these videos at 1080p, and I figure it's probably pretty easy for you to watch it at that resolution and zoom in on it right now, but I will zoom in a little bit during the painting process. So here, some of the aspects of this are directed by my 3.5-year-old son. So I just sort of went ahead and while he was watching Beetlejuice, just sort of drew this picture. And So little ideas here or there were just him saying, do this, do that. The actual only thing he didn't like was he didn't want his head popping off like that, even though that was like my favorite part of the whole piece. So I overrode him on that one little detail. But all the little ghosts in the background, he wanted to see, and he wanted to have a big goofy mouth and all this stuff. And so my kid was actually was sick while I was working on it, and he kept falling asleep and then waking up while I was doing something else and barking at me to finish this illustration. So this illustration was all done on the couch in more or less one sitting, with my son either laying on me or laying next to me, which is actually why there's some parts that could be better, because I couldn't really move my arm super well. So now we're working on the detailing on where the buttons go and the belt. I found sorry, I didn't check the artist. I'm pretty sure it was Norman Rockwell, but I think a Norman Rockwell painting of a Boy Scout from a really long time ago, and that's what I sort of loosely looked at, because I don't really know what a Boy Scout wears. So I just wanted to make sure that, because this guy obviously looks older and he's like bigger, that he had like the really short shorts and the bandana around his neck and all that stuff. So I tried to reference that piece a little bit, but I didn't get overly wrapped up in the details. I didn't want to put like all the sigils and stuff, but he had that particular Boy Scout had one of those belts where you just sort of slide the cloth part in, and so I just wanted to stick with that. And you can see, if you go back a little bit, I took his little head cap that's popping off and I rotated that a little bit just so that it had a better motion line coming off of his head. You can see on the rough there where it was and now where it is. So now we're just going to finish up his arm that's sort of running off the screen. The way that I intended to build this sort of goes back to that thing about organization, is I had to sort of start pre-visualizing what I wanted to do with the piece. So the way I'm going to build the layers here is that rough is on its own layer, the background's on its own layer, and then these lines are on their own layer, and then I'm planning to have the hand that's in the foreground, his entire body and his other arm, and then the ghosts all be on 3 different layers, because I don't exactly know what I want to do, but I do know that at some point I'm probably going to want to push that hand forward, and I know that I'm going to want to push those ghosts back, and I sort of want to be able to set myself up for that properly. So that's why it's going to be built like that. Here I'm working on the bandana, which I then reviewed the reference and realized that big sort of bow that I had put on him was wrong. So now it's got that weird knot thing, or at least a version of it, a simplified version of that knot, with the little part coming out the bottom with the other knot. It's very complicated, actually. And then here, just adjusting, now that big bow is gone, I need to sort of adjust where the pockets go so that I can accurately fill in the space with the right amount of detail. Here I'm building the buttons very simply. In fact, I'll slow it down here and duplicate it so you can see, but here you can see it sort of happen really quick. And then what I actually did was I took the circle brush from the airbrush section, made a dot, used that as a selection, and then I traced around it in order to give myself a circle, which is what you're looking at right there. I just duplicated that and shrunk it to give it the inner rim, put in the dots, and then what I'm doing is just duplicating and warping it, and then duplicating each one of those and shifting them in order to get the depth of the button. If you look at that section again slowly and sort of closely, you'll probably see exactly what I'm talking about. It's not one of those monumental ideas that I really feel like slowing down the video for, but it's just sort of like a fun trick. So now I'm just finishing that arm that's in the back. In another world, maybe like say a Photoshop world, I might have actually done that back arm on a different layer too, but I have to conserve my layers in Procreate. I actually adjusted the size of this canvas so that I could get some more layers out of it because I thought I might need them. You'll also notice that I did not finish drawing the hand, his right hand that's sort of in the bottom left of the piece. That's because I did not like at all the one that I had roughed in, and so I plan on going back later and doing a more robust rough of it and then tightening the lines. So you can see here when I started doing the tightening on this hand, I sort of decided that I didn't want to do those holes in the top of the hand where you could see the bones and the meat through it, but instead I wanted to sort of take out a chunk of his finger and have his bone showing on that finger. I just thought it'd be fun. So that's what's going on here. In fact, my son fell asleep while I was doing this and then woke up and he saw it and he was alarmed at the fact that he suddenly was missing a part of his finger, but I told him it was okay and he was fine with it. So this is me just doing the clean version of that hand, and then you'll see now I'm going in and cleaning up the lines where I had overlap. Now I'm going and doing the ghosts really quick. They're very simple, so obviously the lines didn't take very long on this. And then I go through and erase all the sections where there's overlap with the drawing in front. I made the lines too thick in a couple spots, so I actually go through and clean up some of those, which is funny because later I just completely eliminate the lines. But anyways, that's what happened there. And now here on the hand, you can see I'm going in with a red pencil just so I can see it better, and I'm doing a better breakout of the hand so that I can get like a little bit more depth into it and make it a little bit more visually interesting than it was in the shitty rough. So now lowering the opacity on that and going in and doing tight lines on just that hand. Not much to say here, so just sit back and enjoy the nice jazz ensemble. I think that something, at least for somebody like me, that is the hardest part about art is actually patience, because sometimes you might, whether you want to or not, rush certain parts of a drawing because you're close to the end, or it's maybe not the part you like and you want to get back to the part that you do like. And so for me, actually, that's why I put this hand off until later, because I really wanted to focus on it. And if I had done it before, when I was really wanting to get to other aspects of the drawing, I wouldn't have done as good of a job. So really, some of that's really knowing yourself and mood management, I guess. So there's the final clean line drawing for the piece. Now we're going to go into coloring it. So all of this is now sitting on 4 layers: background, then ghosts, then body, then hand. And so when I start flatting it, I start flatting it that way. So there is a flat color for that hand right now. And then after that one in the stack, it would be the lines. And then I'll do a flat for his body under that. And then there'll be the lines for the ghost, and then there'll be a flat for the ghost, and then the background. So basically, when all is said and done, there'll be 7 layers right here, if you include the background layer. Now these colors are a little bit ridiculous. So my son was actually really alarmed that I was choosing these colors. Those of you in comic books know that when you're flatting something, it's really just about knowing the difference between the different colors, especially when somebody else is handling the flats. Also in this video, it doesn't really look that 80s, but as a joke, I decided to put some 80s lasers in it. And then when I was watching the video later, these colors were way more 80s in the actual piece, which is kind of funny. So anyhow, now what I'm doing is I'm starting to adjust these colors a little bit to be closer to what I actually want them to be in the final. And now I'm doing a bunch of stuff with the ghosts. I wanted them to be fuzzy, but not too fuzzy. My son had been watching a lot of Casper, so I wanted them to kind of look like the Casper movie from the 90s. So I wanted them to have a little bit of that vibe. But I was never really planning on having that elaborate of a background. And when you don't have that elaborate of a background, transparency is a little bit hard to read. So it's sort of a, I don't know, it was a little bit difficult for me to capture this in this method. If I were doing this in Photoshop and had a few more tools at my disposal, I probably would have done it a little bit differently. But it was still an interesting process, and it was really interesting to try and solve this. These lines, those red lines you saw shooting all over for a second, that was really just so I could read the transparency a little bit better for a second. Then I threw in sort of a really loose background with a really loose lighting source, just so I could start really thinking about that. I decided that I wanted the zombie skin to be purple because I did a zombie around this time last year, I believe, in Procreate. There's a video up of it, and he's blue, and that's sort of my go-to. And I just wanted it to be a little different, a little more interesting than normal. So now I'm going through and doing all these little sections of him. The spit, I went in and blocked, and then I erase all the lines from it. I lower the opacity of that layer, and then I was putting in some shadow. You'll see me turn that off in a second, but the real thing with the spit was just getting the transparency and then getting the light hitting it, which is all the white that you see going in there right now, just to give it some, depth on the edges. Now we're just continuing to flatten the eyes. Sometimes the flatting process is the most boring process of the entire thing because it's very mechanical, and you're just sort of itching to get to that part where you get to render the whole thing, which is kind of where we're at right now. So here we're just going to zoom in on the slime coming from his head. It's the exact same process as the spit. The only difference is that I made it slightly pink, like that has something to do with the liquid in his brain. I don't know what brain liquid color is really. So it's pink right now. Yep, that's it. Moving on to the next section, doing the fingernails on the main hand. So now all those layers for that hand, if this were Photoshop, I'd put them all in a folder, but can't really do that. That'd be a nice thing, by the way, if Procreate's listening. Folders would be super cool. But anyway, so now I'm all those layers exist, you know, above the lines of the body. All these layers exist above the lines of the ghosts. And so for the spots on his skin, just put in a dark purple and then lower the opacity. And now this is me just doing like a real quick color adjustment on the entire thing. I sort of further adjusted later, but I just wanted to test a few things fast. And now what I've decided is the smallest element of this whole thing is his hand. The smallest complete element, I should say. So I decided I'm going to start with the hand so that I can use it as my proof of concept for the rest of the illustration. So I ultimately settle on a purple shadow. I actually tried a couple real quick. You could sort of see them all fly by back there. But I decided that purple was still going to serve me the best. And then I'll do a hard rim light coming from whatever that light source is in the top left, presumably the moon. And then I will do a blue light bounce coming from the ghost. And then I also do a bit of a general fuzzy shadow around the entire silhouette of the hand. You saw it flash by really quick. I'll do a tutorial on that stuff soon where I'm actually specifically breaking that out. I'm sorry I haven't gotten to that yet, but I basically just fill the whole canvas, delete away from the section where the hand is, and then blur that whole thing, and then delete everything that's not the hand. I know that's a little hard to understand explaining it that way, but like I said, I'll try to get to a quick tutorial for that later. So now that that hand looks good, it's something that I was at least happy enough with to move on. I start moving through the rest of the body. So I started with his arm up in the top right, and I'm doing the exact method that I explain in my Select Clear, Select Paint tutorial. So if you go back through my videos, you'll see that, where I'm starting at the backmost layer and I'm using that as my selection, and then I've got my shadow on the topmost layer. And so what you'll see me do is, like, I'll paint a section and then I'll delete the shadow on that would be corresponding to the layer above that, and then I start painting there, and then I delete and then paint and delete and then paint, and that's the whole process. So I highly recommend that explanation right there was purposefully limited because it's way more explained in that other video. So please go look for it. The thumbnail is like these blobs of color, so you can't miss it. So I decided to go with this painting method because it drastically limits the layers compared to doing a highly rendered sort of color by color thing. So if this were more robust layer support, I might have actually gone for more of a full render, but I think this ends up working out just fine. So I'm leaving the layers to support the shadows and to support the limited coloring style, and going with this simple one shadow layer as opposed to, say, having like 5 layers for his skin and 5 layers for his eyes and 5 all that type of stuff. So now we're just going into the eye, adding some extra shadows there and erasing away from the lines and the veins, and now we're just doing sort of that meat and jaw combo. When you see all those crazy flashes happening across the screen, that's me doing that trick I said where I have that shadow layer that's sort of the halo around the entire thing. So like I said, I'll get to a better video of that soon where I really break out how to do that. Here I just switched to one of the pens in the pen section, which I think it's called like flat brush pen, and that's what I'm doing all the white in. There's no adjustments to it whatsoever. For here, I'm just doing a white brush pen rim light layer. Later, what I'll do is I'll duplicate that rim light and make the color that's the duplicate that's underneath a color, like a rich color, and then I lower the opacity of the top rim light to sort of absorb what's underneath. I'm sorry all this goes by so fast here at the end. I really wish that there was a way to get that a little bit clearer, but it's just a ton of layer adjustments and a lot of just sort of extra shadowing. I put in some clouds in the background and then some armpit stains like on his arm. And then here, using an add layer, I just did some subsurface scattering in the ear, and then I throw in some ghost eyes at the end. So let me repeat all that for you. So here it is again, slower. It's a lot of stuff. You see I put that extra little ghost head, and then I'm doing some stuff with the backgrounds. I did a thing where I duplicated the entire illustration and erased away all the shadows, and then I blurred that so that I could get a bloom coming off of everything that's bright, which I should probably do a separate tutorial on that. I threw in like this little pathway on the sort of vague background, put in those clouds, put in a gradient shadow on the bottom half of him, and a couple of other just really minor adjustments. Like I said, there's the armpit stains. So I know a lot happens in there, and I know that I've mentioned in this video a lot of things that I'm like, I should explain that better. Please leave a comment and let me know what you'd like to see better explained, and I'll try to do in a next video just like a bunch of short little 2-minute demos on how I do a bunch of this stuff. So then I throw in these little glowy eyes because my kid thought it'd be fun, and that's it. That's the illustration. So it went from this rough image right here, which I just used as a planning image, and then it went into this tighter line, again done with the same pencil in both illustrations, just kept at different sizes and applied differently. And then this is the illustration that we ended up with at the end. It was really fun to do. Happy Halloween, everyone, and thanks for watching. And if you're looking for me on the internet, these are the places where you can find me.